Hi, today my guest is David. David is the director of TIMAR, really a real estate agency. David, thank you very much for being on this podcast. Thanks again, really, for being here.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for having me. No, it's a pleasure to talk everything property today.
Beautiful. Please, David, introduce yourself and share your journey. How do you first get started in real estate?
Yeah, so we're based down in Tasmania, a buyer's agency. Been buying property for clients for nearly on 5 years now. Real estate was a hobby and a passion over the last 15 to 17 years. How I got into it was, my wife had a small business, and we were putting those profits into property investing. And as we do on weekends, we hang out with friends at barbecues, and people started to wonder how we were doing this sort of 10 years ago. So it was a labor of love, and then a labor of helping people and educating people, and which turned finally into a business with some education and training, and brought us to where we are today.
Beautiful. So what the key lesson from these early days you learned and kept it in the way in your business?
Yeah, I think a lot of the lessons that in property that I learned sort of was from long-term mentors or history as I enjoy to study over quite a few years. The real passion around property began when my parents lost a few properties due to the sort of the early 1990s recessions. In one instance, they'd sold a property, and then a few weeks later, the proceeds of that property was in a bank, and the bank closed, and they lost all those funds. And as a child, I grew up and started to wonder why that happened, and you start to look back at credit history and banking and property, and you start to sort of wonder how this mechanism and perpetual mechanism happens, and maybe you ask yourself, why did it happen to my family? And then that became a rabbit hole and a journey for me. Actually, I started to ask a lot of questions and read a lot of books, and I always found a lot of direction in people who are a lot older than me. They shaped sort of what the property market was and where it had been before. And, I always say the future rhymes with the past. And I think that loss of what my family went through is probably the burning factor of why I enjoy it, and probably why I like working with clients for a very long-term perspective and not a sort of short-term gain. But that's what the journey was. It wasn't definitely, I wasn't in property from high school. I went into a retail career and learned, managing people in a service-based industry and customer service-based. But property was that calling for quite a while. And now I put in sort of the lessons we've learned in history, plus my own investing career, and then the really good mentors that are surrounding us. But that's really the burning desire, is probably those early 90s, which you talk to a lot of people who are, who went through that era and went through those double-digit interest rates and how they navigated that. And some people came through it, and my family wasn't one of those families, unfortunately, who got through it. But learning those lessons, I think, is something that I like to bang the drum about and keep it alive, because I think you can always be perplexed with what's here and now, and maybe the good times. Maybe we're riding that wave, right? Maybe we've been riding that wave for the last half decade, definitely.
With everything happening in the market right now, what the major shifts or changes you are seeing in these days and your perspective?
Yeah, I think over the last sort of maybe 10 years, we can have a look at what happened through Sydney, Melbourne in 2010 to 2016, and there was a really significant boom through those sort of major CBDs in the country. The issues around the Royal Commission in the late 2010s, which sort of paused a lot of that, and then the growth sort of South Australia and South Australia and Queensland over the past 5 years has really inflated a lot of the land market. And I think a lot of my premise and a lot of my thoughts actually is in the the cost of the land piece of the equation of property, not so much the dwelling. And we can see that land value has increased significantly over the last 5 years. Western Australia, South Australia, and Queensland have really taken a lot of that tank in terms of the growth. So, where do I see it now? I think as an investor, we need to look at our portfolio in a different lens. We can't keep betting on the organic growth of the market. I think we've got to look at managing cash flow. We've got to look at manufactured type growth. How do you make money, or how do you hold those properties and really good core properties through any market? I think something that our business has gone through here in Tasmania is our property market tapped out about March 2022. Over that last 3-year period, we've ebbed and flowed about somewhere between 12 and 15%, depending on what data set you want to read. And our clients had to sort of go through that piece of the puzzle, why the rest of Australia was booming. But we've learned a lot of those lessons that I've been educated over the last 20 in investing is buy for the long term. You have a good good property strategy, a good property plan, and you manage your finances and your cash flow, and you can see through those times. And we're still making good returns for our clients through manufactured growth opportunities. And a lot of those clients who have held over the last 2 years have done extraordinarily well in terms of equity gain in the last 6 months. So it's that learnings that we go through, and we educate our clients, and we make sure they can manage those investments. Where do I see the market going from here? Maybe I've got a bit of a crystal ball, but maybe I don't. I don't think anyone really does. You look at the climate around higher inflation, or the stubborn inflation as we could call it, and interest rates, and the government stimulus, or the government granted licenses, as I seem to call it, in terms of first home buyers. I think there's some frothy times still around. As an investor, you got to be able to see through the clouds a little bit. But I think, you got to pick your markets, you got to pick your locations. And as we all say, the location will do the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
I think the forecast for us around is, there's been a flight to regions and remote and sort of regional locations over the last 5 years. And I can see that trend probably going the other way, and centric back into CBDs, and, naming the Sydney and the Melbourne and, the Hobarts is probably that good example where investors should be now starting to be centric around jobs and location and getting close to transport and facilities. So that's the sort of trend I see, investors wanting to park their money. But, it's hard to, Queensland, Southeast Queensland's example, it's just extraordinary growth, over a 5-year period. Not too dissimilar to Sydney, Melbourne from 2010 to 2015 as well. So, those markets on a macro scale definitely move in rhythms and waves. And it's something that, probably one of my passionate things is study that on a larger scale over the last, 30 years.
Okay, David. Every high growth business has something tricky behind the scene. As a director for your real estate buyer agency, what the biggest operational challenge or bottleneck you have been working on to solve lately, if there is something or challenges you have in your agency at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, great question. We're based in Tasmania, and we service the island in the investment market. And as I mentioned before, you look at countrywide. Buying a house under $600,000 is challenging. In any other state at the moment.
Absolutely.
Maybe Darwin might be an example, but if you're out deep in the regionals, it might be okay. But if you're looking, metro markets, it's very challenging. Hobart's been one of those markets where houses have been readily available over the last 12 to 18 months, under 500k, under 600k as well. And over the last sort of our challenge in our business. And maybe a success actually that's come off the back of it has been, being able to source enough of those, pre and off market properties for clients coming on board, due to the wave of buyers agents that have come into, the Hobart and Launceston markets due to price point. Really, that's really been the big key. There's been some infrastructure, but fundamentally, the state hasn't really changed. So it's really that's been, that sourcing piece has been a real interesting navigation for our business. We're based, in Hobart and Launceston, so we're based on the ground, and we've been dealing with a lot of these agents to get access to property over the last 5 years, and that's really pulled us through this period of time for our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship based, knowing the markets very well, be buying here for 15 years. So though you add those components together, with the influx of hundreds of buyers agents who are buying remotely into Tasmania,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's really got our business through is our local connections, our understanding of the local market, and knowing, we have these discussions today with real estate agents who bring us a lot of this pre and off market property is, we're here for the next 15 years. We'll be buying off the same person for the next 15 years. And those relationships are, you can't build them, in a matter of months. They're taking years and years and years to build. And I think, competing with other buyers agents has been really healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's opened our market up to different eyeballs, and I think that's been wonderful. But as a business, that was a new challenge to us, and we've overcome that really well in the last 6 months.
Beautiful. Speaking about challenge, if you could fix one thing in in the business, one thing that slow you down for as a director in your business, what that would be?
Yeah, I think, understanding where you are within your own market is very important in business. Knowing your total, your total addressable market is very important as well, and knowing where that ceiling leads to. Tasmania is a small market, has 7,700 plus transactions a year. You compare that to a couple of 100,000 of other states around Australia. So we work in a very intimate, a very small market. Our growth is parallel to those numbers as well. I think with that, in terms of the growth piece, we toss between, do you grow exponentially and you can't find the right product for the right client at the right time? And that's probably comes back to our core belief. Our business mission is to live your best life through property. So we've sacrificed major growth in our organization, and we've sacrificed that at the ability to find the right property for the right client. I think that's what we're staying true, because that comes with our long-term philosophy of being able to continually buy for people through any market, up or down. And we're locals. There's 500,000 people in our state. At one point or another, I'm going to have to walk down the street and see a client in the street and give them a high five that we did the right thing and we bought the right property.
Mm-hmm.
Might be hard for other buyers agents to say that if they're working in metro markets with millions of people. It's not uncommon that I'll run into clients every day. So in terms of what's holding us back, it's nothing that's holding us back. It's our philosophies that we want to do the right thing by every client.
Beautiful. Speaking to that in the growth, if you look 6 to 12 months ahead, what are you focusing on growing or improving in your business?
Our plans are really to segregate our business out. We've got an owner-occupied part of our business, and we've got an investment side of our business because we're in that smaller market. It's really growing and developing each one of those teams and diversifying into each of the markets throughout the state. So we've got a satellite office up north and in Launceston, and growing that part of the market is a real joy for us, and that's where we're focusing over the next 12 months. And continuing to build our property management business as well, guiding that in investors. So our property management business is around growing clients' portfolios and how do we work and strategize with them to implement strategies to build equity through there. So they're probably our two main key drivers over the next 12 months around growing the business up the north part of the state and our satellite office, and then growing our property management aligned with clients and building strategies there.
That actually makes me ask you the question, David. So what do you define success by this time next year for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's it's success is a lot of things to a lot of people, and so our success, what we look at it here is our culture, our team. We want to keep surrounding ourselves with great people. We want to keep building the knowledge of our people, and that knowledge, is the ability to continue to educate people in what I call property investing or the land market. Really, that's the big piece of the puzzle that I find the most exciting about the future is, we've had some wonderful times in the property market in the last 5 years. There's no doubt about it. With every wonderful market comes a challenging market. And the thing that we've faced in Tasmania over the last 2 years is we've had that challenging market and we know how to navigate it. And we've navigated it really well. So, that's the thing that I think, our business will really separate itself from others, is being able to navigate through clients, and our team is educated and have a great culture. And that's we enjoy what we do. Buying property is a happy journey. There's not many sad people in our industry, and we want to continue that, right? That's
Yeah. Basically, if everyone's buying the right property, definitely they have done the right thing, no matter what the time is, and you basically contribute to that achievement.
I think on that point there, it's success and celebration is something that it needs to be improved in the property investment space. Like, it's, some people, it's they're only, they're 50, they're mid-50s, they're 60, and they buy their first investment property. It's celebration time. I think it's something that we strive really hard to do, is celebrate with clients around, that journey. It doesn't have to be 10, 15, 20 properties. It can be that first one at any age. And I think it's exciting. So.
I agree, absolutely. I remember these days when I actually stepped into the market and bought my first place. The buyer agents gave me the right decisions and find the right locations. It's amazing time. I remember the agents who sold me the land told me, Sam, in 10 years' time from now, you're going to thank me for what I have brought you on this table. Okay, David, first thing that comes to your mind, one common mistake you see in the industry.
Time.
I
think that's a mistake, in a lot of people. What I talk about when I talk about time is investing. Doesn't need to happen tomorrow. I think you've got to take the time to understand what the right property strategy is for you, have the right time to spend the right time on the plan as well, and then the right amount of time executing on the right property. The best deals that I've ever seen for clients have come through patience, and that's something I advocate. You don't have to beat the market, you don't have to be in first. It's about making sure it's the right property for you, and that takes time. And that's a mistake that I do see, is people rush, make a knee-jerk reaction, FOMO. We all know what that's like, right? And when you see it and smell it nearly every day out there in the industry. So that's a mistake I see people do, is jump in too quick. Don't take enough time.
Fair enough. One thing you wish more clients to understood beside the time?
Besides the time, what do I think? I think they need to understand what I wish they understood a little bit more. A lot of them do it really well, but understand that, do your own research as we're doing it with you. Educate yourself, because if you can learn to do this, in terms of buying property and the right method and the methodology to buy property, there's an opportunity for them to do it themselves at another time or another possibility. So education through that period alongside us, I think that's really good. And I think the investor becomes a lot better investor when they're actually just putting a little bit of time into that research and learning along the journey. So some clients do it really well, but there's still a lot of clients that lean very heavily on that, which is great, and we like doing that. But I think longevity, you probably feel that that's the way we like to invest, is for the long term and long purpose. They can learn along that journey of buying with us is good outcomes.
Fair enough. One thing agent overlooked too often.
As in real estate agent or buyer's agent?
Agents in general.
I think in terms of property itself, what they miss opportunity is probably something that we see time and time again. And opportunity lies really with the property type, the property location, or the right zoning. I think there's those three combinations. The location for us does all the heavy lifting. I mean, if you can get that right, you can fix most other things. That's sort of one of the biggest pieces. The piece of the puzzle you can't fix is location. And I think some agents just miss what locations mean for the life of that property. And I think that's something that we try and take advantage of. If it's a selling agent that missed it, that's sort of what we try and angle and as an opportunity for us.
Understood. Yeah. For the agents, actually, sometimes overlooked and being busy with other works to do and missing some sort of opportunities. Beautiful. This was great, David. Really, thank you so much for this conversation. It was really good insight from your perspective and about everything we have shared today. It's going to be definitely useful for anyone listening to this episode of yours. Thanks again for being here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, and it's great to chat.